Hi, I am going to tell you about George Washington. George Washington was the first President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief of the American Revolution. He was one of the founding fathers of the United States. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732 in Westmoreland, Virginia to Augustine Washington and Mary Ball Washington. His father was a landowner and planter, due to which George spent most of his childhood on the farm. He lost his father when he was only 11. He managed the plantation with his mother and supported his family. George was taught at home by private tutor. Later, he started attending regular school. After the death of his father, his half-brother, Lawrence Washington, became his guardian. George had an interest in mathematics as a child, which helped him to become a surveyor. He completed his formal schooling at the age of 15. At the age of 16, George started working as a surveyor. He took measurements of new lands and mapped them out in detail. He was also a part of a professional survey team, arranged by George Fairfax, a friend and neighbor. Because of his work, he traveled a lot and moved to Virginia. His journey into the Virginia forest earned him enough money with which he acquired land of his own. In 1749, he got a surveyor's license from the College of William. By 1750s, the French had started to expand their territory. In 1753, Virginia's Lieutenant Governor, Robert Dinwiddie, sent Washington to Fort Leavenworth, which is now located in Waterford, Pennsylvania. Washington was given the task to ask the French to leave the area as it belonged to the British. He successfully did this job. A few years later, Washington became a leader of the Virginia Army, although he had no prior experience in the military. He was also included in the French and the Indian Wars. In 1759, Washington resigned from his job and returned to Mount Vernon. It was a fruitful time for Washington. He expanded Mount Vernon's property to 5 farms. He even grew different types of crops such as wheat and corn, fruit orchards and fishery. Washington continuously experimented with new crops and techniques for land conservation. Later, he was selected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, where he served until 1774. The next year, Washington became the general of the Continental Army. Boston attacked the area and a war broke out. The war lasted for 8 long years, but Washington proved to be a great general. Throughout the war, he motivated his ill-trained and ill-equipped troops. His army mostly consisted of farmers. Washington's army of colonial farmers fought against trained British soldiers. His army eventually gained a victory over the British. One of their most courageous feats was the Delaware River crossing on Christmas, leading to the ultimate victory at Yorktown, Virginia. The British army was defeated at Yorktown in 1781. After the war ended, Washington became a national hero. Washington remained commander-in-chief until the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783. It satisfied the underpaid Continental Army. With this treaty, Washington wanted the Continental Congress to pay proper compensation to Army people. After the war and conflicts were resolved, Washington resumed the life of a planter. But he also continued to be involved in national politics. In 1789, Washington was selected as the first President of the United States. Washington served as president for 2 terms, and it was a peaceful time for the country. He established the role for future presidents and also the traditions of the President of the United States that still stand today. He played a significant role in building the Constitution. He also established the first presidential cabinet during his term. The cabinet included his friends Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State, and Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury. He remained president for 8 years. However, Washington felt that the country needed a president who was not too powerful and would not rule like a king over many years. Washington married Martha Dandridge Custis, a widow with 2 children, in 1759. Washington died on December 14, 1799 in his home at Mount Vernon after he suffered from a bad cold and throat infection. He left a lasting legacy as the father of the country. He has one of the most enduring legacies of any American in the history.